Hello, my name is Hugh Harmon. I'm a third-year psychology student at the University of New England, currently studying behavior modification at the moment, and today I'll be talking to you about a general guideline and a helpful guide to help you or someone you know hopefully quit smoking. So what's written on the board at the moment is a general outline of what I'll be discussing today in the video. The first part will be a functional assessment, which will basically help you identify and understand the components of the problem behavior of smoking, which trigger the behavior and also maintain the behavior for the long term. This will then lead me into the second part of the video on self-management, and this will consist of some helpful tools and procedures which will help you reduce the problem behavior of smoking and hopefully extinguish the behavior over the long term. Alright, so with this first section on functional assessment, I'll be quickly going over what this is, what this does, and how we implement it to help you and someone you know quit smoking. But first I want to point out one thing, and that is when we ask ourselves, how do I quit smoking? We need to understand that within the science of behavior modification, a behavior is understood as being lawful. And what this means is that the occurrence of any behavior is influenced by environmental events. So essentially, the problem behavior of smoking is directly influenced by the surrounding areas in which it occurs. So thus, a functional assessment is defined as the process of gathering information about the antecedent and the consequences that are functionally related to the occurrence of the behavior. So what this means for us is that a functional assessment will help us to determine what are the stimuli events that are involved in evoking the behavior, and also what are the reinforcing factors and consequences that maintain it over the long term. So for example, if you had a stressful day at work and you came home and had a cigarette, what's happening here is the environmental event of a stressful day at work is acting as a trigger for you, as an antecedent for you to feel like you need to smoke. Thus you go home, you have a cigarette, and you get the immediate reinforcer, which is a consequence of feeling relaxed. Now from here I want to point out there's three types of assessments we can do, and that is the first, which is an indirect method, which involves interviews with the person and questionnaires. The second part, which is a functional analysis, which involves manipulating the antecedents and the consequences which are involved to see which are functionally related to the behavior. And lastly, and the one I prefer and would recommend, is a direct observation. And what's involved here is the person who has the behavior, or perhaps you helping the person, observes them directly and records the antecedents and consequences each time the behavior occurs. So the disadvantage and advantage of this is that it's very time consuming, as you need to write down a few things. But you can reassure the client that it's only going to last a week. This is just for us to be able to understand clearly what's involved with the behavior, what's causing it and what's reinforcing it. The main advantage, as sort of has been suggested, is that it gives us real-time, accurate results of what's causing the behavior. Whilst with another method, such as indirect method, with interviews, we're relying on the person's memory, which can be biased and also inaccurate at times. From here, we have three types of direct observation we can use. These include a descriptive, the checklist, or an interval recording method. So what I would recommend to do is for the client to do a descriptive direct observation, and what they'll do is whenever they have a cigarette, they will write down on a piece of paper what time they had the cigarette, the place it occurred, who was present when they had the cigarette, how did they feel before smoking, and how did they feel after smoking, and also, and finally, how many cigarettes they smoked. And perhaps any other information that could be useful to you in helping determine what are the factors that are causing the behavior. The next step from this is to conduct a functional intervention, in which includes differential reinforcement and self-management, which over the long term will help us maintain a reduced frequency of the behavior. Alright, so with the last section on self-management, what this refers to is when behavior modification techniques and procedures are used by the person to try and change their own behavior. Now, for us, in our case, of trying to quit smoking, this would refer to us trying to reduce the frequency of this behavior. Now, there are a couple of procedures and techniques that can be used. I'll start off with what I would recommend, which is differential reinforcement, specifically DRL in this case, which refers to differential reinforcement of low rates of responding, in which we're trying to reduce the frequency of the behavior, which we would have found an average daily rate during our functional assessment, and reduce it down over a period of time to hopefully a rate of 0, which can then be maintained over the long term. There are a couple of tools one can use to maximize your intervention's success. These include social support, antecedent manipulations, and trying to find an alternative behavior for smoking. So with social support, you can get friends and family involved to try and help you to quit. This could include them just saying, how's your day going? How many cigarettes have you smoked, perhaps? Antecedent manipulation could involve perhaps removing any stimulus that triggered you to smoke. This could include having a lighter in your pocket or having cigarettes in your jacket. And finally, trying to find an alternative behavior. You could perhaps take up yoga or exercise or any sort of stimulus that gives that same reinforcing feeling of relaxation in our example. One thing that we also need to do is set achievable weekly goals, in which the frequency of the target behavior reduces slowly over time until you reach, or your client reaches, their desired rate of the behavior.